Welcome to this episode of Talking Straight with Mr. Shyam Sekhar. Today we are going to be discussing about how the way we see and perceive wealth has changed across generations, how we can navigate conversations with family around money, and we're also going to be speaking a little bit about trusts and wills and succession and estate planning as well. So first let's talk about how the way we see and perceive wealth has changed over generations. So if you could just speak a little bit about how your parents saw money, how you saw it as a kid versus how you see it today, and also how your children view money today. So how do you think this has evolved?
See, if you look at the transition, it's a very interesting multi-asset transition that we have seen. At least I have seen it. Because you have to go back 2 generations. Okay, 2 generations ago, India had a very draconian taxation system which was trying to tax up to 97% of a person's income, which means the government wants everything.
Correct.
It doesn't want to leave anything to you. Now, such a system will naturally lead to people looking at asset classes where they can invest without getting discovered. And also there was the legacy of creating security through wealth for families.
Right.
That is deeply ingrained in the Indian psyche. So these 2 factors together made gold the first asset of preference amongst vast majority of Indians. Right? But though it is the first preferred asset among vast majority of Indians, its affordability was probably restricted to the top 1%.
Right.
I am talking of even gold. Then, most of the gold was owned by these people and they did not have to actually account for how much gold they have to anybody. There was a wealth tax which would apply if you discover or if you disclose. Government has to discover that you have it or you have to disclose to government that you have it. Neither was happening. So, most of the gold investing could comfortably happen below the radar. So, nobody had to actually pay tax. So, money which they could take out of the tax system was always stashed away as gold. Also, there is a factor that real estate did not have so many takers because in the early decades of independence, 3 or 4 decades, urbanization was extremely slow. Now, you are seeing rapid urbanization, especially post 1990. So, when you are doing it post 1990 at this pace, you are going to see people shift from gold as the first asset of preference towards real estate as the first asset of preference. And people who already have a lot of gold want another asset.
Correct.
So, they go towards the second asset class. Now, even when this was happening, financial assets were not really preferred by the wealthy class. Strangely, the primary financial asset of Indian savings was always a fixed deposit or product similar to a fixed deposit in risk, like a PPF or an EPFO or RBI bonds.
Right.
Or post office savings. So these are the 5 things that you can broadly say. Of course, there was NSS and NSE also. So that is also something which was supported primarily by the middle class, not by the rich. The rich did not keep their money in these things. So the rich basically transitioned from being gold heavy in one generation to being gold and real estate heavy in the next generation. So, gold was legacy, real estate was what the second generation built. Financial assets probably came only in the 3rd generation, right? Which is the post-90s generation. So, only in that generation you are seeing financial assets growing. So, the transition has been very, very interesting to the point that today, most families believe that financial asset should be the primary asset, real estate should be the secondary asset, and gold becomes the tertiary asset. So, literally the pyramid has inverted from Gen 1 to Gen 3. So, this is what I have seen.
Understood. So this kind of brings us to financial goals. That has also clearly changed across generations. And now, especially today, people call themselves the sandwich generation, where they have to take care of elderly parents and costs are high. They have to educate their children and that is high, and housing and inflation and all of that. So financial goals also have changed from all the three generations. So how do you think that has changed, and how these asset classes will tie to those goals?
Firstly, this sandwich generation is also an Indian construct. It is not a Western construct.
Correct.
Indians want to send their children abroad to study, okay, which is fine. But they want to live by some old Indian rules, or what they believe to be the Indian way of how a kid should be educated, which is the parent has to give everything, right? Secondly, this concept of taking care of elders is again an Indian thing, simply because that we are a young democracy and the previous generation did not really have an access to create wealth that would be sufficient to see them through their life. This is largely the case with families which are just coming up.
Correct.
Suppose you have already come up in the first or second generation, the third generation need not take care of the first generation financially. You need to physically be present for them. So that is a different problem. But where the sandwich generation has to take care of elders financially and next generation financially, it's mostly an Indian construct. In my opinion, taking care of elders financially is something which is a higher priority than taking care of children financially, because elders don't have an option or an alternative.
Yeah.
But children definitely have an alternative where they can actually take a loan and fend for themselves and pay it. But parents are chickening out of this. They are too worried or too scared to actually take that bold path. But I personally think they should. I'd rather they be toast than sandwich, where you have only one side and not two sides. Right. So I think that is my view. I don't think you should become like a club sandwich.
Right.
And I'd rather you be toast, where you just take care of one generation and leave the next generation to take care of itself. And learn to discharge that liability, because that will really create a stronger Gen 3.
Correct.
Okay. And a stable Gen 1. So and also it will allow the Gen 2 to breathe easy. So this three generational axis has to be correctly formed. I don't think Indians are forming it correctly at this point. And actually they are inverting it. They are giving more to Gen 3.
True.
Okay. And somehow managing to give Gen 1 and depriving the Gen 2. So the person who is providing is actually depriving himself. I am not a votary of this behavior. I think it's the wrong behavior, and it creates all the wrong reactions among the beneficiaries also.
Right. So that also kind of brings us to spending patterns and saving patterns. Obviously, our previous generations or my parents, they were all more focused towards savings, and they were a bit more conservative in their spending and how they went about their spending. But that again seems to be changing a little bit in today's generation and context. So how do you think this might impact future savings, and whether it's going to be sustainable, or how should someone navigate that?
See, savings in India will always be a challenge, for the simple reason that you are not going to see a homogeneous increase in income across the board. I'll give you a small example. Assume that you joined a marquee IT company 10 years ago. Let's say another younger person joins a marquee IT company today.
Right.
The entry salaries are almost the same. They have not even beaten inflation. So the savings capacity or potential of somebody who joined 10 years back was significantly higher than somebody who is joining a job now. Second, I think the cost of living in urban India has risen far higher than inflation, or whatever we see as inflation metrics. Salary is not rising at the same level that cost of living has risen in urban India, which means that a very vast majority of young people today who are coming into the workforce are going to struggle to save, or have to consciously make a lot of sacrifices to save. And where are these sacrifices likely to happen? They should logically happen in consumption, but it is not happening. In your parents' generation, this consciously happened. They were very conscious in their consumption.
Correct.
Unless the current generation is conscious in its consumption, it will have no savings. So it will live paycheck to paycheck.
Mm.
In the current economic context, that is a very, very serious existential risk, because you just are one health issue away from personal bankruptcy,
Correct.
right? Or just one job loss away from personal bankruptcy. I think people are underestimating the problem. I think the problem is very, very serious, and we need to actually adopt a consumption that is conscious and cautious, both. I'm not saying don't consume, but be conscious in your consumption, be cautious in your consumption. People are neither adequately conscious nor cautious, because they feel that it is more important to live the moment, and peer pressure is very high. So they are actually borrowing from their future earnings and spending in the present. So it's not a good situation right now, but it has to change fast, purely for reasons of survival and existence.
Understood. So, money in general is a slightly sensitive topic in many households in India. You come from a business family, so it was probably not that much of a taboo and it was discussed on a regular basis. So, when is it a right time for children to have this conversation with them, speak to them about how can we educate and make them literate about, say, taxes, expenditure, consumption, and lifestyle choices as well?
See, business families always discuss money, but there's one big difference. When I grew up, people only discussed money with me. Nobody gave me money. So, you know the value of money. You know what money can do for you. But you also know that you need to find that money. They are not going to give it to you easy. Because it wasn't so much in liquid surplus. It would be in the form of assets.
Right.
Business families never idle money. They don't keep money in a bank account or in a deposit.
Correct.
So, because they don't keep money in a bank account or a deposit, they would never have the liquidity. It will be in assets, either in the business as working capital or as fixed assets in the form of land, building, whatever. So, if at all we have to see money, we need to create that money through hard work and enterprise. But today's generation doesn't have that problem. Money is on tap because wealth has become so financialized that everybody knows it is available on tap.
Right.
And people do talk money in business families. Where they don't, the next generation finds out.
Correct.
If you are making a youngster who is 19 sign a income tax return, he's going to read it.
Yes.
Whereas 20-30 years back, probably you will just blindly sign.
True. So, what would be a right age for, say, somebody who doesn't come from a business background? When can they start having conversations with their children? Or there is a lot of debate about whether giving monthly allowance is the right way to teach children about it. So, what is your take on that?
I think there's no difference between somebody from a business background or from a career background. Talking about money is a way of imbibing that spirit and right culture in the next generation. The right spirit and the right culture. What is the right spirit? The spirit is to understand the value of money. The culture is to understand how to be responsible with money. Now, unless you talk, the person is not going to learn. Many people, and I have seen this in even people who are actually not in very high paying careers, they will get their children whatever the child wants. They will personally sacrifice, but they will buy the child whatever the child wants. I'll give you an interesting example. My maid always borrows money to buy bike for her children, not bicycle, motorcycle. The motorcycle which she buys, I am still in the mental block of cycle. The motorcycle which she buys is not a fuel efficient one. It is not a vehicle with good resale value. Right? It is a product which is aspirational for the son. She does not even go into the merits of what product she is buying.
Right.
And how the boy is going to use the product. Whether he is going to create a livelihood with that product. The boy would say that he is going to join a delivery job, so he needs the bike. But subsequently, he would not go regularly to the job also. Right? So, this is how people are actually encouraging consumption or spending for their children without proper conditions and covenants. You don't have any precondition. You are not telling them that they have to live with that product which you give in a certain way. You have seen people buying these Sony PlayStations,
right.
Middle class people buying. And you know how it gets a kid addicted to playing, such that the kid is not able to think beyond anything. Those days, probably the PlayStation was 20, 30, 40,000. I don't know what it costs now. Probably 5,000-10,000 more or so. I don't know the price. But the concept was, my kid wants, I am going to give my kid. So I gave you an example of my maid giving a 90,000 bike those days. And now, more affluent people giving expensive products to children. Today, I am seeing parents buying iPhones to children.
Correct.
Because the kid says, I want iPhone. And why should you gift a 21-year-old an iPhone? Why can't that kid earn money doing something and buy that phone? This is the problem in our system, that we actually provide because we think it is our duty to provide. And while we provide, the person to whom we provide this does not value the effort, the difficulty in raising the resources, and the challenges of diverting that money, which is probably meant for the future of the person who has earned it, towards their children. There is no thought or consciousness that is instilled in that person. So, this is the kind of consumption that we are seeing. And I think this kind of a consumption has consequences. It has not one-time consequences. It creates a behavioral pattern which comes back again and again and again.
Right. So, does giving a monthly allowance make it slightly better to navigate?
I was speaking to you about giving what a kid wants. Monthly allowance is not in the same category. Because, let's say a student always has some requirements. Like a school student will have to buy some consumables every month. So, actually can be given a consumable budget, which is a monthly allowance, with a, some kind of a happiness allowance or a chilling allowance, right? A college student can have a slightly higher allowance. Giving an allowance basically makes the person budget.
Right. Become more conscious about what they are consuming.
If you are taking a kid to a departmental store or supermarket, don't allow them to buy anything for themselves beyond a certain budget. A simple technique. Suppose today you are shopping on quick commerce, have a monthly budget.
Right.
Don't allow them to just order on your cart while you are on the phone and just get whatever they want. Don't give your phone to the kid and say, buy whatever you want. This is generally what parents do.
Right.
Because you don't even calculate. Maybe for you it's not a big number. But behaviorally, if a kid is buying something every day for 200 rupees, because you want the kid to keep quiet and not disturb you in your work or something like that. Then spending 6,000-10,000 rupees seems, nothing to that kid. So the kid won't value money, even of the order of 6,000 to 10,000 rupees.
Correct.
To earn which so many people struggle so hard. So the value of money doesn't get taught. So even if you are doing it digitally today, if you are going to give children anything digitally, stick to a budget. I think giving an allowance gives very good basic lessons in budgeting, and you keep increasing the allowance, keeping it realistically, and at some point say the allowance is over, which means make him find his fish.
Got it. So also if you see now in a generation where parents are growing more financially, and there are again like lifestyle upgrades and choices that they make. So probably say 10 years back they were taking their children to Ooty for vacation. Today they want to take them to Europe. So how does the parent as a generation still stick to their goals of achieving certain amount?
It's a very, very difficult problem that you have come up in life. In your childhood, you have not experienced much. So there is a time for you to experience the world, and that is also coinciding with the time you are raising your children. Should you deny yourself what you are already denied in your childhood while you are raising your children? The answer is no. It's a straightforward no. What people do generally is they always try to keep their own standard of living below what their earnings will comfortably support. They do this in the name of educating their children or keeping the children grounded.
Correct.
I am not so much a fan of this. The reason is straightforward. When you are ready to enjoy, that is, your children are grown up and they have gone away, you probably won't have the time or health to do what you want to do. Like you want to buy a very nice car. Let's say you want to buy a Mercedes. Should you buy it when you are 40 or should you buy it when you are 60? When you are 60, your children will all be settled. So there is no question of your children getting misled by for living a good life. But the time when you could have really enjoyed the Mercedes is between 40 and 60 probably, somewhere in between.
Right.
So most people are not getting the best out of their own life because of this aspect. I don't think that's the right approach. Now, the flip side is, you have earned a lot of money, you have come up the hard way. In your childhood, you probably went second class on holidays, in trains. Today, you want to travel business class. You want to go for a family holiday. Your children are also there. So, if you buy business class for them also, they straight away get accustomed to business class. They don't know second class train travel. This problem doesn't have easy answers, which means that you have to send your children to other excursions, group trips, field trips, vacations with peers, which also accustomed to other things. So they should get used to going in the normal modes of transport as well as in, let's say, a business class. So they should get used to eating simple food, sourced for a very low price, and they should also be able to sit in a high table and eat. So the balance should be struck, and it should not be you do the high table 80% of the time and simple food like a tokenism. So the balance that you give in the children's experience is very, very critical. It is not easy at all. This is not at all easy. And with people who have succeeded more, this problem gets more and more complex. But people are trying in their own way, and there are no easy solutions. But the ground rule that you have to follow is make them understand what is a normal middle class life, because that is what most of the Indians are leading and are going to lead. So they should not think that they don't belong to that life and that way of life. They should also recognize that whatever life they are enjoying, which is above that, is just a blessing or something that has been given to them because of your effort. Then the value of money will be entrenched in the mind of a young person in the right way without giving him a culture or sense of entitlement. It's a tough thing. This is not at all easy, but you have to keep on trying. I think that's all a parent can do.
On a lighter note, can you quote some examples of what you have done for your children?
So I have never traveled business class with my parents. Simple, straightforward. But I have traveled business class with my children, right? But they also travel economy. Whenever they go alone, they have to do all those things. Now, there's always this dilemma that whether you should also go economy class just to teach them these values. You've done it long enough. How long you'll do? So the 40 or 60 question which I asked you for a Mercedes also applies to this. So everywhere this question will keep coming up, and it does come up. So in our house there are definite budgets on how much they can spend on ordering food from outside, buying clothes from outside. They can't just take the phone and shop. None of them have their own credit cards. So they don't actually spend money beyond what their budgets allow them. So in that sense, it's like any other house. We also have all these things and we follow. Not because we want to restrict or anything like that. That awareness makes them better individuals in their own right.
Correct.
And not just somebody who's dependent on you. Because I have faced the same thing, of course, at a much stricter level with my parents and my grandparents. But maybe our way of upbringing our children is not that strict, but it's still strict. in the
Understood.
context of the time and what others
Right.
do. Probably the way we bring up our children is stricter than what a salaried professional with, let's say, a good 1 crore salary will do with his children. We try to be stricter than that.
Thanks for watching this episode. In our next episode, we are going to be discussing about succession and estate planning, and we're also going to be discussing about formation of trusts, having wills and settlement deeds in place, and how the transfer of wealth can happen from one generation to another generation seamlessly.